I found sports.
I found my passion.
I found family.
I found my calling. I found a place to call home. Discover what you can find at Marietta by visiting marietta.edu today.
Hello and welcome to our election coverage tonight on WCMO-TV.
We're here to bring you results and news regarding today's elections.
News Center 15 starts again now. Good evening again, and welcome to our election night coverage here on WCMO-TV. I'm Ethan Brown.
And I'm Jessica Hill.
Well, we've got some election results coming up here in a little bit, but first let's go over, once again, some of our local issues. Washington County residents have similar ballots throughout the county this year. All registered voters in the county will decide between 2 common pleas court judge candidates, 2 county auditor candidates, and 2 county commissioner candidates. Magistrate Shoshana Brooker is the Democratic candidate running against Republican John Triplett for judge. Kevin Ritter is the Republican candidate running against Democrat Jim Rainey for commissioner. Leslie Pittenger is the independent candidate running against Republican Matthew Livengood for auditor.
And outside of those candidates, half the county will select a new 95th District State Representative to replace Andy Thompson, who has served the maximum terms allowed in the Ohio House of Representatives 4 consecutive 2-year terms. In his place, either Dan Milson, a Democrat, or Dan Jones, a Republican, will take the reins on January 1st. Likewise, in the 94th District, Ohio Representative Jay Edwards, a Republican, is running for a 2nd term, this time against Taylor Sampington, a Democrat.
And the big ticket item for Marietta residents this year is the levy to increase the city income tax from 1.7% of earned income for those who live and or work in the city to a 1.85% tax. Marietta City Council's Finance Committee says if passed, approximately 2/3 of the tax levy money would go to the fire department for new equipment and to fund increased squad runs. Approximately 1/3 would go to street repair and maintenance. And now, as I understand, Landon Santini has some updates on some statewide races, such as the governor and Senate race for both Ohio and West Virginia. So let's head back to Landon Santini.
Oh yeah, that's correct there, Mr. Ethan Brown. As a matter of fact, the majority of those races are still going on right now, but one of them, the winner of this election, has been decided, and that role is the U.S. Senator for our lovely Buckeye State of Ohio. The opponents were Sherrod Brown for the Democratic Party and Jim Renacci for the Republican Party. I'm sorry in advance to those people if I pronounced your names wrong. And the winner is, by a number of... Oh, okay. The winner is Sherrod Brown. He is going to be our new U.S. Senator for the state of Ohio. The other ones, like the U.S. Senator for West Virginia, is still pending as of right now, but Joe Manchin III is currently in the lead for the Democratic Party. And the issue 1 that a good chunk of Ohioans are going to be voting on is currently voting for a majority of people voting no for the issue. And the runners-up for the roles of Ohio State Governor and Lieutenant Governor is Mike DeWine is currently in the lead for the Republican Party. All right. So in other news about Ohio elections, Chief says an estimated 1.2, I'm assuming that's 1.2 million number of people. It's going to be rolling along as we continue rolling along in the night. There's a lot of ups and downs in this lovely debate of ours. It's a lovely thing to talk about, and it gives quite a bit of headaches to people. Anyway, Ohio's elections chief says an estimated 1.2 million absentee ballots have been requested, and more than 737,000 absentee ballots cast so far for next Tuesday's midterm election. The Ohio Secretary of State's office says those tallies, as of last Friday, are up compared with the same point in the 2014 election, when more than 881,000 absentee ballots had been requested and 477,000 had been cast. So, yeah, one thing, whether you're political or not, that I think we all can agree on is that the numbers can be very confusing. But remember, elections are not won by numbers. Well, actually, they are won by numbers, but they are won by something much more important. They're won by votes, at least in this country. And never forget this: smart politicians trust the voters, not the polls. After all, if you can't trust the voters, whom can you trust? I'll tell you who you can trust, and who I most certainly trust. Our lovely anchors here at WCMO Television, Sherrod Brown and Jessica Hill. I'm so sorry about that. I'm terrible with names, but I'm not terrible with making friends. So with that said, back to you guys at the desk.
Thank you for that, Landon.
Thank you.
So that's some of the more up-to-date results for the more local or the more statewide races. Excuse me. Those will continue to develop throughout the evening. So if you're wanting to check up on those, be sure to follow online or another news station that will be going on well past us, and be sure to follow up on those numbers.
And there was one more winner that was decided. It actually says that Bill Johnson won his seat for the U.S. Congress for 6th District. So way to go, Bill.
That is true.
Yet again.
As I understand, we have some interviews that were done down at the courthouse today, or this evening, I should say, for some of the more local issues. Our own Jared Ruffin was down there to interview with some people, so we'll have some interviews to roll for you, hopefully starting now.
Here with
John Triplett.
John Triplett. Okay, so we're out here at the Armory, and it seems like there's a lot of people here. Everyone's really excited. So are you excited going into this?
I'm very excited. I'm excited to be in this race. I'm excited to be here at the Armory. I'm a veteran of the United States Army. You might have guessed that from the hat. And so it's pretty, from my perspective, it's real special to be here in the Armory. I'm glad the city, Marietta, has this facility available.
Well, thank you so much for your service. What's the most important thing about this race to you personally?
Doing the right thing. Doing the right thing.
Okay. I can agree with that. I mean, I think that this race has had there's been a lot going on in Ohio. Me going to college here, and you hear about it on campus. And so if you do win, like, what do you think, what are your first steps, and what are you going to do?
First step for me is to get myself familiar with my staff. I mean, that's kind of a basic when you take over a new job. But I've been a trial lawyer for 34 years, so it's just a different side of the bench for me. Issue 1 will have a big impact on our community and on our state. If it passes, it's going to be a tough way to go for a lot of people. So that's going to be important. Judge Carani is starting a drug court the first of the year, and I'm very excited for that. I hope that we can find the funding to start a second drug court and possibly even include veterans in part of that, because like myself, Judge Carani is also a veteran.
Okay. So we were right at the courthouse, and we saw that a lot of people are voting no on issue 1. And what are your thoughts on that? Oh,
I agree with them. I spent 25% of my advertising budget in the last 2 weeks voting no on issue 1. You'll see a big vote no on issue 1 on one of my billboards outside town. It's the worst thing I've seen on the ballot in 34 years. People have to make their own decisions, but anyone that educates themselves should be afraid.
Oh, that makes perfect sense. Well, thank you so much, and thank you for your time.
All right, thanks.
Yep.
And that was Jared talking with one of the candidates for one of the local races here, and we have Jared joining us here at the desk. Jared, could you talk a little bit about what it was like down there at the courthouse?
At the courthouse, there was a lot of energy. I'm going to say that when we went to the courthouse, a lot of people were there. They were really engaged with just the discussion about what was going on in Ohio and a lot of the races. And as we moved down to the Armory, they had a little party going on for Triplet, and that was where his base was at. And we talked with a lot of people, and there was a very positive vibe. And I think that a lot of people, they came in voting, and they were just excited to see where Ohio's going to be headed.
Question I have about both the Armory and the courthouse. Did you have trouble finding the place?
Well, I'm from California, so I mean, even though I go to the school,
yes, you did.
Yeah, we had a little bit of trouble finding the school.
City
We got
of
there.
Marietta.
We got there. That
If
was
we're going to take
huge.
shots like that, then that's great. But if I understand correctly, I think we have some numbers. Some numbers of some of the local races that we have here on full screen. So if we have those ready, we can have those numbers ready for you to read. Okay, so here's some updated numbers on the Ohio governor and lieutenant governor race. Cordray and Lieutenant Governor Sutton are currently in the lead. They're representing the Democratic Party, and they have 50% of the vote. DeWine and Houston are trailing at 47%, and the Green Party candidate Goodell Newton and his Lieutenant Governor Joseph trailing behind at 2%, and Irvine and Grayson of the Libertarian Party are at 1%.
And then for the Attorney General for Ohio, Steve Dettenbach is in the lead with 51%. He's the Democrat candidate. And then Dave Yoss, the Republican candidate, is slightly behind at 49%. So close race there.
And as for the representative to Congress's 6th district, we have Bill Johnson for the Democratic Party in the lead with 68%, with Shauna Roberts for the Republican Party at 32%. I guess Bill is going to make it to Capitol Hill after all, if these numbers are to be believed.
And then for the U.S. Senator, we have Sherrod Brown, who for the Democratic Party, leading with 54%. And then we have Jim Renassi for the Republican Party, who's trailing at 46.
And then the state representative for the 95th district, that race currently leading, Dan Millison of the Democratic Party. He has a 63% lead, which is a fairly convincing margin over Don Jones, who has 37% of the vote.
And then the state representative for the 94th district, Jay Edwards, the Republican candidate, has a slight lead at 54% over Taylor Sappington, the Democrat candidate, who is at 46%.
The Washington County Commissioner's Office will be, as the numbers indicate, most likely be held by Democrat James L. Ranney, with the Republican opponent at 34% being Kevin Ritter.
And for issue 1, shall the amendment be approved? And most likely it's not going to be approved. We have, for a no, we have a 63% rating, and then for the yes, it's only 37%. So it's leaning to be a no on issue 1.
And that appears to be that all the numbers that we have thus far for our races. So any thoughts altogether, guys?
I think that it's been a very successful midterms. I think a lot of people went out to go vote, as you've seen on the news, that record numbers are coming in of people voting. And I think that we're going to go ahead and see the fruits of their labor and what the people want.
I think we're going to see even more interesting results as we have other things coming in.
True.
Yeah.
I know that the next presidential election is going to happen 2 years from now. What's going to happen? Because I'm not nearly as I'm going to make a quick confession here. I'm not nearly as familiar with politics as my co-anchors here. I'm not ashamed of that. So my question is, what usually happens in the year between the midterms and the presidential elections?
I think I could be misunderstanding this, but I think the midterms tend to sway in a direction towards the party opposite of the political party that last won the majority. So if the Republicans, for example, in this case, had won the majority of votes in the previous midterms, then projections would likely show that Democrats are probably going to win a lot of the races. But, you know, as numbers come in later on throughout the evening, that'll remain to be seen, I think.
Mm-hmm. And who wants to hear us keep talking when we have an interview we can show you of someone else talking?
Oh, let's have a look at that.
All right.
One of our own, Cooper Holmes.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am Cooper Holmes with WCMOTV, and I'm here with
Carolyn Mahoney.
So, Carolyn, what about the election is most important in your opinion?
That we go red. Everything needs to go red. We need to back Mr. Trump, I believe. And I think John Triplett will be good for Washington County.
What are some changes that you're hoping will come from the election, or what are you looking forward to the most post-results?
I hope all this bickering and arguing will quit. We need to be united, not separated like everybody's been griping and carrying on. He's our president. We should back him, I think.
Very well put. Is there anything you personally wish would have been added to this election, or anything that you wish would have been retracted from this election? Any sort of issues or anything?
Well, mostly just the bad mouthing. I just think, you know, if it had just kept it civil, we tell our kids, don't badmouth people, don't be bullies. And in this election, it's been a lot of bullying, I think.
So, just to have a final wrapping up conclusion question, if there was one piece of advice or one word of wisdom that you could tell the generations to come, not only about how important voting is, but just how important getting their voices heard about issues like this would be, what would that be?
To pay attention to local elections and national elections and how it's going to affect down the road, not just this year and not next year, but for years to come. And if it gets worse, we're in trouble. So we need to back whoever we believe is the right candidate and vote. That's the only way to do it.
Thank you so much for being part of this interview, Carolyn. I definitely appreciate it. I am Cooper Holmes of WCMO TV.
Thank you. Thank you.
Desk is not big enough, so we do not have room for him to fit up here and talk with us, but we definitely appreciate you helping out with us.
Yeah, we prefer not to have people sitting on our laps. We don't swing that way.
He fits in our hearts.
Cooper wasn't dressed for success today, so we couldn't let him on.
That depends on what you qualify as success. It looks like he conducted that interview very successfully from my point of view.
I think, yes, Cooper asked some very sensitive questions, and I think he got a very straightforward answer.
Mm-hmm.
I think especially the last question when she talked about what future generations should look forward in these elections. And I think that she gave a great answer of being involved on the local and national level.
Mm-hmm. That whole concept of multi-generations can be very daunting to some people. I mean, considering that our country was formed all the way back in the 1700s, even adults they just have a very hard time conceptualizing how huge a span of time that is. I mean, I'm just having trouble comprehending the fact that most of the results that we're talking about aren't going to be finalized until about, I'm assuming, midnight.
At least midnight, probably, for some of them, yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm also curious, I know we've been talking a lot about the local elections here in Marietta and across the state, but I'm curious to see some of the national races, like the Texas race, the Georgia governor race, and stuff like that, because I think there's a lot of very interesting races that'll not only define like just this year, but will definitely set some precedent for many elections to come.
I think that it'll set a mood And regarding all the different numbers that come out tonight, regardless of whoever wins, I think that there will be a change in mood in America. Will it be a positive one or a negative one? We don't know yet. But there will be a change.
We're definitely going to be striving for a positive change. Because really, who in their right mind would want to have a negative mood change?
I don't always think people perceive it as negative.
It depends on like what would be negative for some people. It might not be negative for others.
I know that. I know that's different for some people and that people in general are different. I'm talking on like a philosophical, idealistic level. I'm just kind of an optimist like that.
Now, if we're thinking about that, some people in Texas don't work on a philosophical level.
Well, I think we could sit here all night and discuss the philosophy of politics, but I do not want to sit here all night personally, and I'm sure that these three would like to rest some too. It's been a long night. We do want to thank all of you watching at home, watching online, for joining us here tonight for our election coverage. For all of us here at WCMO TV, both front of house and in the back, we want to thank you for watching, and of course we want you to be sure to tune in on Tuesdays and Thursdays for another great edition of News Center 15 at noon 30 and 6:30. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.
Have a good night, everyone.